Maybe there's something, a through line with Lebet and Femme in terms of the reason that two people are soulmates is the thing that keeps them apart. And I think often that's like, it's almost like in great affairs. There's a moment of timing where two people on an opposite trajectory meet, and that meeting point is so amazing or profound for whatever reason. But it is profound because the nature of their trajectories is that they have to keep on going the other direction. And I think in both films you have, that is what is at the core of these two love stories.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
George MacKay is an actor. He sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
Is there a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you get a new character? Is there a typical first step that you take when you close the door? Mm-hmm. You know, you're alone, you have the role, mm-hmm. and now you have to figure out, how am I gonna wrap my arms around how to play this?
I mean, it really depends role to role. I mean, there's like a fundamental thing which I always get to pretty soon, which is it's simply going through the script and going through it a number of times. And so it takes quite a long time, because then once you sort of know the things you're going to get to, and once you have the kind of almost director's view of it as well, you know the seeds that you need to plant. And then once you sort of can map that out, then thinking, okay, what caused these seeds? If it's not necessarily in the story, or if it's something that was mentioned in the script, going and talking, like kind of making up or researching why those seeds get planted in the story, really. So I'd say that, and more, if I've got time with the project, context is becoming more and more important to me. Because it feels like, there are only so many stories that can get told, and what brings a story to life is an understanding of the context, because that gives you an understanding of the stakes. It adds to character, it adds to mood. So I'd start with, very simply, just the script. The script is always like, if you had a day to do a project or you had 6 months, I think you'd be best place to work on the script in either scenario. That is your skeleton, and then the sort of the muscles and the tissue and all the sort of fibers that you put on top of that, and then the clothes on top of that.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Like
the skeleton of the script, and then there's muscles.
Yeah, then you put the muscles, and that's how it works, and then the skin, and then like all the layers. And I think sometimes you have a week to do a job, and so very quickly learn the skeleton, don't change the skeleton, and you put it together pretty quick. But then like the really detailed performances are when you've had a hand in like the muscles, then, the type of, then the fat that goes on top of the muscles, that like everything. It's quite a physical thing of just layering it, basically.
Yes, and that is all malleable. Like you're saying, that's why this analogy is good, because the structure is the skeleton, that doesn't change. But you could make a muscle bigger or smaller.
Totally,
you could add fat to it for various reasons. And if I'm understanding your analogy.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I'm kind of working out the analogy as I speak, but there's something I think almost like with exercise, if you work out your arms, only your arms get bigger, and so it's almost kind of like paying attention to, and it's up to you. It's almost like to use that thing, to make like the script like a bodybuilder or something. If you wanted to have like a big chest and arms, you focus on those scenes and you work out those scenes. You work out those scenes. You work out those scenes, and they will become dominant, for better or for worse. Yeah. But if you want something that's kind of, athletic and kind
leaner,
of leaner and applicable to different sports, then you work out the whole thing gradually.
That's very interesting, man. And when you say context, give me an example of finding out context for a particular character and how that's helpful.
I did a job like a few years ago, which meant a lot to me, called The True History of the Kelly Gang. And that was, my dad's from Australia, and Ned Kelly is, a folkloric hero of Australia, and the whole film was a kind of bit of a riff on what's behind that legend and how we make history. But in doing it, suddenly it was like, right then, very simply, I was preparing to play him Australian, and eventually we did. But at that point in time, all the white settlers of Australia were either Irish, Scots, or English, pretty much. You know, so you kind of go, oh, so Australia it was basically like a penal colony. So all of these people have either been moved from somewhere else, taken a boat for how long, gone there, worked on the land in sort of prison labor, and then got released onto this empty land. So it's, well, not empty. That's, you know, that's the whole terra nullius thing. But basically you kind of go, oh, okay, so all of these people have come from, this isn't their home. They're trying to build their home very quickly in a land that is like physically they've never been in before. There's people that they recognize who are from the same village as them. There's people that they've never met before. They all sound different. They all look different. You know, and just simply like carving out the land. You know, there was no machine tools that they were using. So you just kind of, the context of like, oh, you realize these people are tough. Or that's why the humor's the way it is. That's why drinking is like a kind of just a day-to-day, you know, where they get all the practical stuff of where they get the water from. Is it cleaner to drink alcohol? Is it, you know, do you want to sort of drown your sorrows? What have you come through? All of that stuff of just going, whereas for me, as me from London, don't drink a huge amount. So if I drink rum at 10 in the morning, it means that something's going on in my life. You know? But for them, it's just, you know, maybe it's normal just the thing that they did. So therefore you know how to hold that glass, you know how to look at the glass. And I mean, that's all maybe going into sort of too much detail, or is a sort of
no, but that does matter.
Thing,
but that does matter, right? I mean, because you're going to have to hold the glass on a camera, so it's like you're making a decision. How to hold it.
And I think at the end of the day, the best, you know, performances can be very self-satisfactory to the actor, but at the end of the day, we're all in service of a story. And the story is all about telling a good story, and for whatever reason you're telling it. And the context can help you understand the stakes of the story. And if you have control over the stakes of the story, then the story gets better. If you realize in the same way that, you know, say there's an old watch that my dad had or something in the story. To me, I'm like, well, what's an old watch? I don't, you know, who needs them? I've got my phone. But to that man, if you know the story well enough and you know the context, you know what that watch is, but you know that is there. That is everything to that person. So I think context helps understand stakes, which just helps you pull the levers of the story. And then you can work with the director, who you can have a conversation practically about the storytelling as much as you can just, you know, the scenes.
It sounds like from what we're hearing, your approach is very much as a storyteller. You have to enter this work as an actor as a important storyteller, right? How did this develop for you over the years, where this becomes a thing that you're taking into consideration?
I guess it's maybe of sort of more of recent times that I think that there's, in the end of the day, a good story is a good story. It can be on whatever scale you like. It can involve as many people. It can be in whatever context. But if you invest in the characters and there's attention to it, and not all films have to be like that as well. Some films can be a more kind of artistic piece. One is like a meditation on a theme or something. But at the end of the day, I find like if the story is successful in its telling, then that's it. You know, that's it really. And at the end of the day, we mentioned Eddie Marsan, who's someone I've, you know, worked with and really look up to. He sort of spoke about it in those terms, saying that you're all in service of the story. You're all just cogs in the wheel of, like cogs in the machine of telling this story. So that's the thing that you can kind of, almost more than, you know, a film or a theatre piece or a picture, it's a story. Because that's what, at the end of the day, what you're making it for, to give people over, and that's how it will affect people as well, if they invest in the story.
You have 2 movies coming out here in America at the same time. The Beast and Femme. These 2 characters, I mean, it's fun. I'm almost laughing when I say 2 characters, because it feels like it's more than 2 characters you're playing in The Beast. But these 2 entities, it feels like they couldn't be more different, right? I mean, like some people may not even know that it's you.
That's good.
Hopefully, it's a good compliment, right? If somebody says, "I didn't know you were in that." But I think The Beast is the only film I can think of that I have seen twice, that I will see again, that I have absolutely no idea what happens. I mean, I don't understand. I don't even want you to tell me anything.
Right.
Tell me what it was like just to read this script and realize what had to be done here, and how did you start to begin to figure out what this work was going to entail?
Here I am banging on about story, and then you have some pieces of work like this where, of course, there is a story. But the story is sort of, there are 3 stories which amount to one story. The suggestion is there have been many stories either side of that, and those stories are then chopped up in the structure of how they're told. So, maybe I eat my words and, get rather comfortable talking about myself. But the Beast, genuinely, when I read the script, I was blown away by it because I'd never read anything like it.
Yeah.
And it feels like, again, not meaning to sort of paint cultures in broad brushstrokes, but it felt very French as well in terms of its kind of romance and how intellectual it was as well, and kind of existential. And I just loved that a film script, like a big, bold film script, would be written in those terms.
Yes.
Like stylistically, having so many different styles at once, in the writing, in the visuals, in the character. And also, I love that people discussed in those terms. It didn't feel pretentious.
Right.
It felt really exciting. So I just wanted to be involved. And then on top of that, obviously, I play Louis, who is ostensibly, there are 3 Louis in the film, and Bertrand, the director, had always said, that you will play 3 characters who are ostensibly the same person.
Yeah.
And I've always found that idea that kind of the more and more I've got older and with acting, this idea of what makes a person or an identity, how much is there like a core of us that has been set and that will be an immovable, and how much is that then shaped or encouraged or grown or damaged by our context,
or adjusted,
or adjusted, and then how much do we then control that in relation to the context? How much things happen to us that shape that core and chip away at it like an ice block or something to shape it into one thing, and then how much do we then harness the context to sort of change or hide or grow whatever's inside? Now, I don't have an answer, but I find that an endless and exciting question, and therefore this project was the kind of perfect petri dish for that, if that's the right term, because I had to basically be the same person and be 3 entirely different people, and work out what was going to be my through line between those 3 men. And of course there was, there's a roadmap with it, a sort of hidden roadmap in the script, and Bertrand and I discussed that a lot. But that was just so exciting as a prospect. That's what drew me to it first.
And then when you realize what has to be done here, do you start to make those connections on your own, or does everything have to pass through the writer and the director? You know what I mean?
It's a bit of both. I think Bertrand and I think in getting the role, I offered up my initial interpretation, and I got the role.
Yeah.
So
that gives you confidence to be like, okay,
to kind of go, this is my offering, and it's quite a specific offering in terms of an understanding. And if it, and that's with any, like, so often you go for so many roles, and all you can do is give your offering, and either you're given the opportunity to sort of move and change it. But the sort of, I guess, like people, there's a fundamental core to what you think the thing is. Right. How it expresses itself might change massively, but the kind of core of what you offer any role that you do is I think is pretty solid. That's hard to kind of break or change, and that's why different people get different roles.
I was just going to say, that's another, it's kind of a nice thing to think about, that sometimes it's not about how you look or even your talent, it's about your approach toward the offering.
Yeah.
And you might just not be offering, like everything else might be right, and what you're offering just might not be in tune with what the director.
And also I think there's a mixture, again, like with all things, anything's a relationship between you and what you give out, and then also there's stuff that subconsciously, there'll be a bunch of characters which only years later I go, oh, that made so much sense at that time. Yeah. I didn't even realize I was figuring that stuff out personally. And then you kind of go, so no wonder it probably was coming in there like a big red flag to the casting or the director. Oh yeah, this feels right for this person. And what's even better is that they're not even aware that they're right for for that. And sometimes you're totally aware. And sometimes you also go for roles where I've had a bunch of ones when I'm like, I fucking know this man. This is me. And you don't get it.
Yeah,
you know. So then to go back to the Beast with Louis, and I hope this doesn't sort of explain it away too much, but I don't think that's possible really. But the seed of the idea for Bertrand's script was this Henry James short story, The Beast in the Jungle. And so that's kind of where the context of 1910 comes from, the first portion of the 3 time zones. And in The Beast in the Jungle, you basically have this couple who bond over the fact that they have this, it's always sort of talked around, but they have this mutual understanding of a mutual fear that they have of this sense that they're going to be doomed. That's this beast, quote unquote, this metaphorical beast is going to come and attack them. And Bertrand has interpreted that as the beast for him in this story is the fear of love, the fear of commitment. And therefore you have 2 people who are destined, they are soulmates because they know each other on those terms. They know a very deep and private interpretation of the world that they share. And yet, simultaneously, because they share that understanding, it's almost impossible for them to be together, because in some way this beast always catches up with them. Louis, who I play in it, because obviously it's about a couple, but it's Gabrielle's story, it's Léa Seydoux's character's story, really. And what I found very exciting is this idea that Louis is also, he both is her soulmate, but he is the beast too.
Right.
He is the thing that can destroy her.
That's so cool. That's such a cool idea.
And so therefore, the idea of that, like, then it just came about, okay, well, how much do I know that I am that thing? How much do I know? How much does she know I'm that thing? And even if I don't know, I need to leave room for there to be the possibility on a 3rd or 4th watching that you go, oh no, there's something terrible about this person. And, you know, and that sort of is a bit more kind of on the nose in terms of the 2014 version.
Right.
But all of it is based on this idea that he has become the beast to her because he suffers from a fear. And this idea that if you're controlled by fear, you're destroyed. And you will potentially, in trying to compensate for that, destroy others. But essentially you'll still be ruled by fear. And that is something that, at the very core of it, I think is a great message to sort of be part of and putting out to the world, of not being controlled by your fear.
When this third, I don't know if it's the 3rd character in 2014.
Yeah. Or 2044. There's 2014 is the American Louis.
The American,
1910, and then the 2044 is the...
Okay, so it's the second character. So it's kind of the second character, yeah. So this, when I was watching it in the theater, I was realizing I don't think people know who this is based on, but I knew, and I don't even want to say that person's name or anything, you know what I'm talking about? But I was just wondering, did you have to go into that whole dark side of this killer that was based on somebody in real life, and have to, because it almost, I'm not sure, I didn't want to go back and look, but it's almost verbatim the video, right?
It's very close to this, a real life killer.
Yeah.
And in a sense, like, I found that the darkness and that person's sort of, you know, I can't speak for the man that it's based on, but like this Louis, my character's kind of terribleness, it's a non-word, but like a sort of terribleness, for want of a better term, comes from his lack of connection to what he's doing.
Right.
And I think that also plays into one thing about the film, which is its sort of intellectual nature. And potentially is one thing that admittedly some people who have watched it have struggled with, is this kind of, there's a slight removal because it's so cerebral.
Yeah.
And this idea that if you're totally in your thoughts, you're without your feelings, and then you're a very dangerous person, because if you then you go into the realm of sort of being a sociopath almost. And so it wasn't a kind of, maybe as expected, playing that second character who is based on a real life killer. I found for myself, at least, it wasn't about kind of going into like this deep sort of seething turmoil. It was more about kind of being incredibly heady about it, rather than thinking with the head rather than with the heart. And because with that sort of feels like it then leads to kind of more and more, I don't know, again, it goes back to fear of like this idea, and then that sort of fear becomes sort of spiteful. So it was more about spite, and it was about a kind of the thing about that character is he was so inexperienced, and that's why he could almost go to the heights that he could, because
Right.
like, you know, I can do a bunch of things in my mind that when I actually come to do them physically, you know, I'm not talking about sort of killing, I mean like if I can run in a marathon or something, I go, yeah, I can manage that. I reckon I could climb up this skyscraper if I had to. I reckon, and then you actually do it and you're like, this is beyond me and I'm really scared, and all of the reality of the situation turns it into something that's different. And this is a man who has isolated himself so much that he lives almost entirely hypothetically, and there is that line, he can only make love in his dreams, is that he lives in a sort of hypothetical world, which is also a product of the context where he's in a world, 2014, the internet's boomed, there's sort of, social media is kind of growing and bubbling, and it's all about this hypothetical sense that he just cannot get above. And so he has to kind of throw his intellect above it, and in reaching so far, once he actually follows through, once he physicalizes the sort of extremes that he's prophesizing and talking about, then it becomes really terrible. Because to kind of get beyond his fear, to get beyond the things that he's competing against, he has to go so far. And that's easy to go far in your head, but to actually go through, that's when the sort of seriousness comes. I also think it's like we're in it feels like at the minute things are sort of so polarized, and it's so dangerous for people to try and identify with someone that they would consider other. And what I like about this script is that the three people I play are so different, but they're also totally the same person. The idea that core, in one context, flourishes because actually it's quite safe in 1910 for that type of person. And as a bachelor, you know, without a certain kind of responsibility, this person is a kind of beautiful, bit of a sort of heartthrob. And then that exact same person thrown into American culture rather than Parisian or English culture, and the sort of a place based on high achievement, and then based with the internet, and based on sort of an outward show of turns inward because they can't manage it. And then in 2044 is where the world around you is sort of so without thought and without feeling, you think, oh, actually, I might as well just join them. And there's a sort of, the terribleness in that is almost like an ambivalence in that, rather than an extreme. It's like an extreme ambivalence. And what I love is that I get to sort of, again, I guess it says that thing that basically we're all capable of so much. It's just sort of what, you know, the context that either, you know, what a context asks of us, or what we then sort of choose to put ourselves into. But I think it is also quite compromising and relatable, hopefully, that, you know, all of us kind of, if we were born in a different time, went to a different school, had different relationships, had
totally different,
would you know, you sort of wind up doing things that you didn't know you could, like good and bad, you couldn't do. And I don't know, I think that's a sort of compromising but healthy thing to acknowledge.
What is the character's name in Femme?
Preston.
Okay, speaking of context here, I'm sure that this person, I'm just guessing, is nothing like you. And so you have to, and you have to give this person a humanity, even though they're doing terrible things in the beginning of this movie. Everybody has their reasons for everything they do, right? And this is somebody completely not like you. And I'm sure, like you're saying, context in terms of where this person comes from, what built them to be this way, also plays into how you are portraying this person, right?
I think in that thing, it goes back to that thing about stakes maybe as well. Like, as you say, it's not giving anything away, but at the beginning of Femme, there is this awful attack that my character Preston is part of, this homophobic attack to the film's lead character Jules, who is a drag artist. And, you know, after an altercation in a shop, we attack him horribly in the street after he's embarrassed me because of an interaction that we've had earlier on, which, you know, when I think it's okay, it doesn't give any away, but my character Preston is gay, but is completely hiding it. And none of his friends know, and he is covering it with this sort of, he's this kind of super macho street kind of like hyper masculine tough guy basically. And so in terms of, you know, what prompts this attack is the fact that I sort of nearly get outed in the shop just from a kind of so like Jules makes a joke about me, and it feels too close, and so therefore we have, I said like the gang and Preston feels that they have to end that, and in terms of the stakes, the whole film is about drag, basically. You've got the feminine drag and you've got the masculine drag, but basically this idea that you take a certain aspect of yourself and you enhance it and you blossom it and you grow it and you sort of put it in front of yourselves, and it's a kind of celebration of that. But my character Preston has taken a certain, and again, this is what I found interesting about him, is he's legitimately a hard macho man. It's just that his sexuality doesn't mix with his understanding of what it is to be a man. And so that kind of dichotomy, that juxtaposition in him, he's just sort of expanded one part of himself to cover the other. And but that second sort of self that he's made is his everything, and therefore kind of thinking about it almost in mortal stakes of if my identity, if my armor goes, my entire life falls apart. And so that thinking about it in a kind of purely dog eat dog way of this is about living. Like if you out me, if you erode this identity that I've built, I'm going to die. And so that's how I thought of that attack, and not necessarily justified as an outsider, completely against what Preston did, but in the playing of him, that's how I sort of articulated of like, oh, you tried to kill me and I'm going to kill you back. And that's the way it is, because we are in a jungle here, and it's literally life and death. That is dog eat dog, and this is how it is, and it's simple as that. And I don't feel bad about that, because my job is to survive, and I'm going to do everything I can to destroy you so that I survive, because that's the rules of the jungle.
And he kind of lays that out even when he warms up to him in various ways. He keeps laying it out, like, if you mess up, meaning if you out me, like there's going to be consequences.
I would destroy you.
All the time. It's like this thing that keeps going through it. Isn't it amazing when you get something like this that has instantly everything you need to kind of play in is right there because of the circumstances of the story and the characters. You know what I mean? So every scene is tinged with all of this energy that you just have to like kind of step into, right? And so it's there for you. Like the writers have made it.
Oh my God! Like we stepped into the most incredible script. Like Sam and Ping's script is so nuanced, but so economical and so clear, and was like razor sharp in its detail, but also completely like stripped lean. It was like a sort of featherweight boxer. Like it was like it's all there. And every sort of, it's all about the kind of micro movements and so and that was, so many of those were scripted, as to like a smile there or a very, and it goes almost back to what you're saying about directing. It was written in such a way where you never felt like as the actor you were being spoon-fed, but it would tell you so clearly the sort of, there would almost be a stage direction would almost be in kind of as if it was like a stream of consciousness, like, and that's not, I can't think of the right way to put it.
So it's not too much. It's allowing you to kind of process it in your way instead of telling you what it is.
Yeah, well, it would sort of tell you what they were feeling, but would do it in such a sparse way that then it was up to you how you interpreted that. And maybe that's something that is kind of, when you were talking about directing, one thing that I find is...
No, you were talking about directing and said that, actually.
Oh, really?
You said that exact thing, and I have it written down. No, actually, I don't have it exactly written down. But you said directors are best when they have a strong vision, but don't tell you how to reach it.
Yeah. Because then you get... It goes back to that thing we were discussing before of like, then you feel ownership. I think I imagine, I've not directed like before, but... I think with anything, it's like, inviting someone around saying, hey, I want you to come around and cook this meal. And you can either go around someone's house and they've got all the cutlery and all the, chopping board and all the veg there for you. And it's like, go chop it up. That's it. We need a dinner by 7. And there you go. You've got your endpoint. You've got all that you need to do. It's up to you to kind of make your thing and do the thing you've been asked to do. But if you get turned up at the house and they go, great, you're here to make the meal. Okay, so what I want you to do is to chop it like this, like that, and do that. And whoa, no, you've put the heat on now. We parboil it first. You're like, well, I'm not making the meal, am I? Like, so it's just about kind of having trust and confidence in each other to allow everyone to do the thing that, you know, that they've both mutually been asked to do.
The problem is that people think as long as the meal gets made, both approaches are acceptable. And you know what I mean? Like, we haven't fully examined the ramifications of a director telling somebody exactly how to do something. It almost makes it like that part of the acting job of the last 150 years, at least in film, is this idea of having to translate what the director is saying in order to make it into your agency and do it so that you can fool people into thinking that you came up with this way of doing it. It shouldn't have to be like that. It should be like, here's the ingredients, make this. I'll tell you if you're off track here. I'll try and push you back. Maybe I'll remind you to turn on the oven. I'm not going to tell you when, but if you haven't done it, I might step in and say, you know, that oven maybe should be on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean, but there's part of me though that, like, I basically, as an actor, I totally agree with what you're saying, but actually, not totally agree, but would also sort of posit at the end of the day, if we truly are just in service of the story, what you're talking about is a kind of is the health of the process, which I think it should. But I don't know, it just depends what people's sort of ultimatum is. If the work gets done and the work's great,
Yep.
you kind of like, in service of the story, you go, okay, well actually, that is the biggest thing. So if it came about with the director telling me every single which way to do it, then I hold my hands up to go like, okay, that is the right thing. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's an endless question of like having worked on different jobs and working out again what works for me, because also then it comes up like the more you understand, the more you want to put across. And I do think there's like actors need to be given room for that. But then I think there is also sometimes an ego with actors where you kind of like, no one's asking, not no one, some are, but like, it's not as often that the makeup or the sound department get asked, how would you like to do that? Because sometimes it's not as helpful for them if the actor improvises and walks around in a different thing. Right. Like, that's where we're leaning heavy on the acting side of things, because I guess this is an acting podcast and acting is important. Is important. But if it's truly a mutual endeavor, we need to sort of acknowledge that, like, some of the time when we shout and then we whisper, poor sound recorders is having a nightmare, you know, but we're having a great time. So I think it's like everyone needs that bit of room, but also in having this discussion, we need to sort of be aware of, like, you know, me wanting to throw water on my face because it makes me feel more in the moment beforehand. Yeah, really fucks it up for the hair and makeup. Right. So I think it's it's a mutual thing, but that's what I mean. Maybe about at the end of the day, if it's about the story, then everyone's gunning for the same thing, rather than like, I'm gunning to do the best acting I've ever done, which might jeopardize another department. And in the same way, if someone's gunning for the costume to be absolutely perfect, they might not allow me to move in the way that I want to as an actor. So it's just, but if we can make it about the story and the vision of the film or the theatre piece or the television program, whatever it is, then there's a mutual goal that sort of sorts everything out.
This question is going to annoy you, I think, but I really want an answer on this. So try. I mean, even if it's a pretentious answer. In Femme, you avoided something that so often I have noticed as an audience member, actors fail to avoid when they're playing a tough guy. Usually it's this menacing performance that isn't really scary. We have to almost forgive it in order to suspend their disbelief and say, oh, that's a tough guy, this guy's scared. You're literally scary in this. Oh, that's great. When I saw you, I was like, thank God he doesn't have that neck tattoo. Yeah. I mean, like, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, it's George, the nice guy, nice actor guy. Like, I'm such a cynical moviegoer. Like, for me to actually be happy to see you without the neck tattoo, like, literally, like, this guy's not going to hurt me.
Oh, wow.
Like, but how did you do that? That's the annoying question.
Well, honestly, no, you've made my day, because it sounds like a very unscary thing to say. That was one of my biggest concerns.
I'm sure.
Is that, like, Preston needs to be, for the story, he needs to be scary. So I'm so pleased that you found him scary. I don't know exactly sort of how I did it. I do think that it has to be cited that I had a huge amount of help from from the makeup. I look completely different, and my initial thoughts on what those tattoos should be were far less than what Marie, our makeup and hair designer, offered up and that we finally went with. The haircut, the tattoos, the costume was, Bookie, our costume designer, was, everyone expanded my sense of who Preston could be. Also in the script, there are certain, and this is where the cleverness of the writing, where it's so clever that it goes unnoticed, but a beat where all little things which I wouldn't have thought to have brought, I don't think, I'm sure, actually I know I wouldn't have brought, but are genius little moments. Whereas in like after, when Preston first picks up Jules and they go home together, sort of voluntarily for the first time, which is early on in the film, it's hopefully a very intense, like tense moment. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the first thing that the guy said is that Preston lights up a joint, and I think in another scene he's also hops into a wee baggie and starts rubbing drugs on his gums. So you know that already, like physically, mentally, he's starting to buzz. And then there was this moment of road rage where out of nowhere, it's scripted, he goes, fucking come on, you know, and there's this horn and the brakes go, and they're just always seeding this idea of you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
At any point, this man could kick off.
Right.
And when he kicks off, it goes really bad.
Right.
And there were so many things that were just seeded into the script for me to do, like to learn like my lines, where like a line coming up, boom, I did something that was very unexpected and usually pretty aggressive. And it just sort of puts everyone in a zone, I think.
Yeah.
So I've got to, you know, thank the script for so much of it. And then, I don't know, just probably trying not to, once you sort of act a general thing, just trying to be specific about stuff in terms of like, if you try and act scary or act sad or act happy,
right,
it's sort of, it's like a watercolor, you know, it's like a big, it's sort of
That's
see-through, but it's a big wash over it.
Yeah.
But if you can be specific about something and just make it about the thing, then then it is what the thing makes you feel, and hopefully the same for the audience. So I was just always try to be true to, with Preston, be very kind of just, and so often his thought processes are incredibly defensive, quite aggressive or manipulative. So I think in just being specific to those thought processes, hopefully then that kind of comes across as quote unquote scary, you know. So.
I don't think I could put this in because it's kind of a spoiler, but I wanted you guys to be together. Do people?
That's been quite a lot of, and I don't know how much to sort of lean on it, just if it can't be discussed, but that's something that a lot of people have said are, oh, fucking wish you guys got together. And also, I think that's, again, this whole thing of like, what's the cleverness of the film and what I loved about it is that you basically take two polar opposites, and by the end of it, roughly, they have swapped. You know, or they swap and then swap back. They sort of break, but they kind of do that, and then there's a sort of Venn diagram of the ambiguity of life, and I think that's where life's at in general. So I kind of But again, maybe there's something a through line with Lebet and Femme in terms of the reason that two people are soulmates is the thing that keeps them apart, and I think often that's like, it's almost like in great affairs or. You know, is that there's like a kind of, here we go, getting real pretentious, quoting Romeo and Juliet, but star-crossed lovers, in terms of it feels like there's a moment of timing where two people on an opposite trajectory meet, and that meeting point is so amazing or profound for whatever reason, but it is profound because the nature of their trajectories is that they have to keep on going the other direction. And I think in both films you have, that is what is at the core of these two love stories.
The way you walk up to that line outside, it's such an important moment where it's like, this is taking everything of him.
I mean, he's doing so much, and I mean, it's sort of there to like, you know, it's kind of Greek. He's there to sort of say, I'm yours forever. Here I am, naked, and he walks up naked, and inadvertently, Jules doesn't even plan it. He sees that. I think he goes, I can. No way. And actually, that moment at the end, talking of great directing, is we played that scene a number of times, and then for one of the takes towards the end of that day, where there is this important moment where Preston witnesses something that is sort of fundamental to where he goes to next. We were filming that scene in a club and so we had 60 or 100 people there, and they were all in front of me mostly, or a couple around for the shot. And obviously for the sound purposes you had to be quiet, so Nathan would begin saying what he said, and then all the sound would go away, it'd be silent. And Sam and Ping, our directors, said something's going to happen on this one, but just go with it. And at the point with which Nathan started talking, everyone in the room turned around and looked at me. So suddenly I was in a room and 60 people all were just staring at me.
Yeah.
And I remember the feeling, I feel it in my chest now, of just being like, and it gave me access to a rage which I didn't have before. Because the first one was just like the heartbreak, frankly, of what's going on.
Yes.
And the disappointment. But then when everyone looked at me, it was like, oh, and you're all fucking in on it, and I'm gonna fucking end every one of you. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me.
Yeah.
And that gave me the rage that then kind of goes into the next bit. But it was really, it was a very sort of physical, it was like a physical manifestation of what he felt was going on. Yeah. It's almost like, we all walk around thinking, it's so interesting. I don't even know if that book's green to you. Like, we're all kind of I don't know how you see, but we assume that we all see the same way, but sometimes we don't.
Right.
And also if you're in a mindset of kind of go, oh, he scratched his nose, you getting bored? Oh no, I should stop.
Right.
Whatever it is, your insecurities and stuff come in. And it was a great way of suddenly making the entire room Preston's point of view of like, oh no, they're all in on it. And the world's in on it, and the world knows, and everything's over, and the only way is to burn down the whole fucking world at this point. Like, it was,
that's so interesting.
It was a really interesting thing.
Yes. I've rarely seen a movie where sex scenes are more important to the story, right? So when you have to deal with an intimate moment that's extended, because it's a scene, and you have to do acting. I mean, tell me about the preparation that goes into that. Tell me about the oddity of the situation, you know what I mean? And how you had to deal with it.
Yeah, well, fundamental to it was we had an amazing intimacy coordinator called Robbie Taylor Hunt, who, intimacy coordinators are a kind of a new thing, they're a growing thing. And Robbie was amazing in all the practical steps of making us feel safe and comfortable and, safe, basically. But then you're right, with this story particularly, the sex is so much part of the storytelling, of the narrative arc. Yeah. And there are so many sort of dimensions to their relationship going on in terms of, it's the sexual relationship is very performative at some stages because I think that's what he wants. And actually I have no idea that he's sort of trapping me within this, but then within this, for both of us, it starts to take on a sort of new meaning, and the intimacy becomes something that then becomes very powerful to one person and very sort of makes the other very vulnerable. So we basically kind of like plotted it through as to, and that was useful because some of the time you have a scene where like the stage direction, they make love or something, and you kind of know, okay, well, this has to be a sexy scene. Again, it's almost like that thing of like playing scary. You kind of go without the context. Okay, how do I be scary? How do you be sexy? Where with this, because the script was so tight and the sex scenes were so important to the storytelling, it just became about like, okay, well, how does this scene move it forward? And the nature of the orgasm within the scene dictated what the character was going through, which sort of sounds silly because it should be like that every time. Yeah. But I've never had to do so much sex on one project. And so therefore there was like, you basically couldn't do it the same every time. Yeah. And even like, there's a fight scene towards the end of the film, and the moves of the choreography of the fight scene is to echo every position that they've taken throughout the journey before.
Now I gotta see it again.
So everything it's a kind of babushka doll of of meaning, I guess. And that in itself gave the sex a purpose, which made it not just an intimate act that I'm doing in front of people. Yeah. It became just like, this is acting, this is part of the scene. And where sometimes, I guess, stunts or sex, in films, it almost becomes like suddenly it's not about the acting, it's about the stunt or about the sex. Yeah. And it almost becomes like a wee island within the story. That's right. Where this is
that could be taken right out too.
Where the story couldn't happen without the sex.
Yeah.
And so that really helped in making it, just about that. Really.
Yeah.
And when it becomes about that, you remove it sort of course, so it feels like intimate and exposing, but with Robbie's guidance and Sam and Ping's understanding, and with Nathan as well. Like Nathan is, I consider Nathan a dear friend now, and as an actor, he's just amazing.
Yeah.
So like, you're also working with an incredible actor and a really wonderful man who makes it like kind of makes it all feel good as well.
Amazing. We mentioned Eddie Marsan earlier, and you had said something that he said that you took to heart, and I want you to just talk a little bit about this. You said that he said something like, respecting other people that you work with instills a massive amount of respect for yourself.
Yeah.
And how important this is. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, as I say, like Eddie, I worked with Eddie when I was 19, and I don't know if how much he knows, but it sort of blew my mind. Like, because Eddie treated and treats, I trust as acting as a craft. And also I think it sort of demystifies this idea that, of course, people, whatever you do, there needs to be a spark of interest or talent or whatever it is. But it's sort of, especially with artistic stuff or creative stuff, because there is a level of truth to some people as well, like where there's just this thing that someone has, and it is sort of like, it's God-given, and so they don't need to, they just wake up and they can paint or play music, and the music's in them, and that is true and an amazing thing. But I've always felt kind of almost like, oh shit, I don't know, well, if it's not like that for me, then how'd you get good? And Eddie's, the way that he treated it like a craft, I think Eddie is just naturally incredible. But it was amazing to watch someone just take practical steps to do something, to play the role. And when you kind of go, oh, it's genuinely got better. He would just do the accent the whole time, and he would talk as himself and apologise for doing the accent the whole time, but go like, I'm from East London and I'm playing someone from Germany. So if I just can't, with the way that my mouth works and with the way that my vowels sound, I can't hop into it like that. And some people can, but I can't. So I'm going to do the thing that's going to make it better. And I thought that was just, it sounds so simple, but I think maybe because I was lucky enough to start when I was younger, all the time I was at school, I was incredibly self-conscious of, not being a wanky actor, basically. And so it almost made the distance of taking it seriously, if you know what I mean. And it was so I found it really inspiring to see someone who was just a really good person, who cared about what they did. And also, as you said, he had this great ethos, I guess, which was just a natural thing to him about respecting other people, and therefore allowing that allowed you to respect yourself. Because there'd be a bunch of times where maybe when I was younger, there'd be something I really feel like I need to do this, but I don't want to embarrass myself, or I don't think actually it's worth it. At the end of the day, it's not worth it. So I won't try it, But when you watch someone else and they go, hold on, I need a minute to get this light a bit better, you kind of go, great, they care about it. They want to make it better. And if you sort of respect everyone else and give them the time, I think it allows you to then go, okay, cool. Actually, I need to jump up and down for 10 seconds before this scene, or however small it is. But that can feel like a really fundamental thing of like, I wish I was out of breath. I don't want to jump up and down in front of everyone, so I won't be out of breath. And then you feel like the whole thing's just sort of lacking in energy that is innate to the scene or whatever it is. I think if you can allow room for yourself, and then also in turn understand giving room for others, then it stops you feeling too bound up about stuff. With all sorts. And also, there's like a practical element of like a musician who doesn't respect the fact that they need to practice gets out of practice, and therefore in the same way that, as you say, it's like an art. So whatever it is, if it's learning your lines, if it's understanding the context and the accent, or taking care of the choice of costume that you have, or any of those things, at the end of the day, it's about making the work better or more real or more truthful.
George MacKay, thank you so much.
Cheers. It's been really lovely. I love this room, genuinely, and thank you for having me. It's been lovely to talk in these terms.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.